Welcome to Kingsdown School, Creative iMedia, Unit R081, Lesson 12, Hardware, Techniques and Software Used in the Creation of iMedia. This is a topic which we need to spend a little bit of time looking at exactly how we go about creating iMedia. Now, when we say hardware, that encompasses everything that you can touch. So that would be things like your keyboards, your mouse, scanners, cameras, visualizers, all of those sort of things. Whereas the software, well, that is obviously the things that are within the digital realm, as it were, those things that you can't touch, such as Microsoft Word, your Adobe Photoshop and the like. All of those things that you use on a daily basis, but you can't actually ever touch them. And then alongside that, we're going to look at the way in which we do things, the techniques that we use, how we use those particular pieces of equipment and the software that goes with them to create the iMedia that we want to produce. So let's have a look at what we've got.
So the objective of today's lesson is to be able to understand the hardware, techniques and software used in iMedia to create the content. The success criteria that we're looking for is that you will be able to create iMedia content for still images, moving images and audio in the correct formats and file types using appropriate software with the right techniques and the necessary hardware as appropriate. Right, so let's get on with it. First of all, why do you need to look at this in the first place? Well, it's part of the specification. As you can see, learners must be taught the hardware, techniques and software, the digitizing of the paper-based documents, creation of electronic pre-production documents. And of course, this means that this is an important topic because it's not only something that you will need to know about for your theory exam, the R081, but obviously how to create all of these items that you need for all the other units. So it's an imperative part of what we are learning. So let's first of all have a look at hardware. Now I told you in the intro that hardware was obviously the things that you can touch. So you can see a couple of the items here. Your PC system, of course, your PC, your laptop, your Mac, your tablet, whatever it is that you're actually using. Peripherals such as keyboards, mice, screen, the trackpad, graphics tablet, microphone, speakers, all the different imaging devices, digital cameras, scanners, visualizers, video cameras, and mobile phones nowadays as well come into that. And of course the more traditional hardware, pens and pencils, of course, paper, and of course printers do actually play a part as well. So as I've put down the bottom here, it is important that in the creation of iMedia that we understand that it's a combination of these things, the hardware, the technique and the software, that will give us the results that we are looking for. Most of the time it's not going to be good enough to just have one of these on their own. Now obviously there are occasions where you would only use a couple, so if you've taken an absolutely fantastic picture with your camera and it really doesn't need any editing at all, it will do exactly what your client has asked you to do, you can just put that on a poster or whatever, then that's absolutely fine. But in the majority of cases, what we're looking at is actually taking one item, putting it together with something else, bring it into the digital arena that we're working in, editing it, again adding possibly something else, and then exporting it again, whether that be back to the analog arena or somewhere else in the digital world. So that's kind of what we've got to get your head around. So as I said, in practical terms, this means we know which piece of hardware we will create or capture our basic item with, how it's going to be actually put into the digital realm, how it can be edited and what can be added to it, okay, and then how it can be exported again, either back into the analog world or, as I said, into a different digital arena. Okay, moving on for the techniques. There are really only two techniques that we have to worry about in the creating. and it's creating and digitizing. Now, for some of you, you'll think, well, they're not really different, but for the theory, it is. There's a couple of really key things here. When you create something within the digital world, then it's already available pretty much for you to work with very many different software packages, etc. So if you create a JPEG, for instance, virtually every single moving and still image editor out there will accommodate a JPEG. So it's one of those things. It's a very well-known format. It's not going to cause you any problems, and it can be used straight away. However, as you can see down the bottom of the page here, if you create a mind map, then you've got to then get that into the digital world before you can really use it. So you've got to understand that, yes, it's great to do a mind map on, say, a piece of paper where it's easy to edit it, or even on something like a small whiteboard where you can actually, wipe things out again and redo them very quickly. It really is a good way of getting the ideas down very, very quickly. But then if you want to transfer that so that you can, say, send that to a different office around the world, you are going to have to know exactly what you're doing. You're going to know that you've either then got to put it through a scanner, or you've got to take a picture of it on your phone or another digital camera. You've got to be able to upload that into the PC or Mac or tablet, whatever it is you're working on. Make any edits that you need, put it into whatever presentation that you might be creating, okay? And then, of course, pack that up nice and small and send it off via email or whatever it is that you're doing. You might need to make that available on a portal or put it on a web page, etc., etc. These are the type of software techniques that we will be dealing with a little bit later. Okay, so the two things that you need to get down, so make sure you've got these written down in a book or on a piece of paper, so that it is the actual creation method and the digitizing, and that is the bit where you are putting it into the digital realm. Okay, so let's have a closer look at the software. Now, a lot of you come unstuck with this. You have a tendency when writing about software to use the individual names of the applications. Now, whilst we do use them occasionally, normally speaking, please only use these as an example. So, if you're asked a question about editing, say, a JPEG, then you would call it image editing software, and then you could give the example something like Adobe Photoshop. That would be the way to make sure that you get maximum marks in your answers, certainly for the R081. The same is the case with things like word processing software. Yes, Microsoft Word, Apple Pages, Open Office files, whatever they are, whatever they're called, Google Docs, whatever it is, that is the application name. It is the type of software that invariably you are going to be asked about. So it's word processing software. Again, presentation software. Most of us know about Microsoft PowerPoint. Apple have their own one, Keynotes. I'm not sure what the Google one is offhand. I don't use it very often, but again, make sure you're using the generic terms. Get used to web browsing software. It's not Google, it's not Firefox, it's not Safari. Okay, those are examples of web browsing software. As you can see, web browsing software will allow you to do a great number of things because there are online applications for a lot of the things that we do in creating pre-production documents. So they are intrinsic to what we do, but again, you must get used to writing this as web browsing software. Now, if you've got dedicated application software, that's slightly different. That indicates that it is only used for that particular topic, really, and therefore it would be quite quite acceptable to use the name of the application rather than necessarily be generic. However, I mean, for things like mind maps there, you can see straight away we've got free mind and inspiration. So I'd be tended again to be a little bit more generic. I would call those mind mapping softwares. We've got Storyboard that, and that is for storyboards. But again, we've got Toon Boom Storyboard. So again, rather than necessarily saying that it's anything particular, just storyboard software, online storyboard software, keeping it generic. And obviously there are some software animation programs out there which have their own software with them, if you like. So they've got the software that drives the virtual camera, if you like, and then they've got their own editing software as well. And you'll see in one of the other videos that we did on moving pictures and animation, things like Maya and so on and so forth, they have different file endings which are specific for that particular software, but have now become so popular that most other editing softwares that deal with animation will probably cope with them. So it's important to understand how this software works. Spreadsheet software, we can often use that to do work plans and things like that. Again, you've got the Microsoft Excel is the one that we quite often use because of obviously we have the Microsoft Suite at school, but there are other examples of this. And last of all there, the video editing software such as the VSDC3, which we now have, Microsoft Movie Maker, Adobe Flash, which as it says also does animation. All of those again need to be categorized as video editing software. So whenever you're going into this exam and you're being asked about software, they are asking about generic software. Okay, so it's image editing software, word processing software, presentation software, web browsing software, application software, spreadsheet software, and video editing software. Those are the things that they're going to be asking you about. Okay, let's just have a look at techniques for obtaining graphics, because a lot of you will do this and you will do it sometimes quite well, sometimes you won't do it quite so well. I said earlier, if we created a JPEG, then it would be acceptable in just about any editing software that you can think of. But most of us don't actually, when we're creating iMedia, very often create the JPEGs for ourselves. Unless we go out and take a picture of something and then import that in JPEG format, generally speaking, we will probably be using somebody else's work. And the way that we get that work will depend on a couple of things. It will depend on things like whether it's free and we have to pay, or whether we have to pay a license for it, whether it's downloadable in JPEG format directly to our machine, or whether in fact we need to save it as an image directly from the screen. So most of the time it's JPEGs. Sometimes you might find the odd TIFF. Sometimes you might have PDFs. Sometimes you might have PNGs. All of these formats will appear on the web, but the things that you need to be aware of is the restrictions, if you like, what's going to trip you up. Okay, so you might find that with a PDF, it's really good quality pictures on that PDF, but the only way you're going to be able to get them out of the PDF, of course, is to do a screen capture of those. And that screen capture is then not necessarily as good a quality as the picture was itself. Okay, so that's what I mean by the restrictions. Quite often, the quality that you will end up with is not going to be as good as you would like, and that has a knock-on effect, if you like. Okay, so we can create also graphics such as JPEGs and PNGs using things like Microsoft Office. So if you were to use the shapes tool in there and some of the other graphics capabilities that it has, you can create something and you can then save it as a picture. Okay, and you can obviously put that within a document. You can actually save it as an individual item on its own. And most graphics packages within word processing software will do the same. But when you then see that particular image in a document, you might actually want to retrieve it again. So in order to retrieve these graphics from their environment, you really have those three choices that I've mentioned before. You can save it as a picture from within the word processing or Office environment that you're working in. You can copy and paste the graphic into a graphics program and re-output it either in the same format, or sometimes it will convert it, or you can take a screen clipping, and again that normally can be saved as a PNG or a JPEG. The choice you make in this case will very much depend on the graphics software that you have and the quality, as I said before, that the document or the graphic in the document was actually created in the first place, and what it's been stored in within that graphic format, if you like, or within the actual document itself. So if it's been embedded within the document and it's still actually a PNG that can be retrieved, then that should be fairly good quality, but the DPI may be less than is desirable for, say, printing processors. And as I said, the final technique involves taking something like a graphic from the internet. That's the other way that you could do this. Find an image using the browser, and most of them again have that capability that you can put in a subject and you can click on images and it will show you many thousands of images. When you do that, again, just be careful, because a lot of people, again, within things like the Google environment, they'll click on the picture, it'll appear in a sort of like a black panel towards the right-hand side of the screen, and they just go and do a screen capture from that. There is a problem there. When you do a screen capture from within Google, you are actually only creating a JPEG of that picture that Google has copied from the original page, and therefore you have only a 72 dpi JPEG. And if you were to put that on something else, such as in R082, when you want to create an album cover and you've used a 72 dpi JPEG, most of you know as soon as you put that on, it will look awful. So you need to be careful. You need to make sure that you actually go to the web page that you are dealing with, okay, not the Google. So you need to actually click on the link that it gives you to the web page where that graphic actually appeared. When you've done that, as you can see what I've done here, you'll go from the list of images to the page which has actually got the graphic that you want on. Then you can right click on the graphic and do a save as, and then you can save it as a JPEG or a PNG. Sometimes it will do it, sometimes it won't. If it won't, then clearly it means that the image is embedded in the page rather than necessarily drawn from somewhere else. So it does depend sometimes whether it will allow you to, but in most cases it will, and then at least you've got the quality that was originally on that web page. Now it still may not be as good a quality as you want, but it could well be better than 72 dpi. Okay, so that covers extracting graphics from within other media. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is create a table that describes the method, the hardware or software, include an example that you would use to create each of the pre-production documents that we use within the iMedia, and who the audience for that document type is. So that draws upon some knowledge that you should already have. Okay, so you should know a minimum of 5 of these documents. So if you use a table like I've drawn here, you can just draw that into a book, or you can do it on the screen. It doesn't really matter. I'm thinking this should probably take you about 20 minutes, probably take you about 5 minutes just to remember all the documents. But hardware or software techniques that we might use, an example of that, the method then that we are actually using. Remember the 2 methods that we talked about? Okay, and then who the audience for that pre-production document is. So as normal, you can now stop the video straight away and go off and do that in your book, or of course, we could carry on. Now, if we do carry on, then obviously I'll assume that you've either been able to do it, or I'll assume that actually you've tried this and you've got a little stuck and you might need a little bit of a help. So here's a little bit of a help for you. I've done half the work for you here. I've given you the documents that we're talking about. So mood boards, mind maps, visualization, scripts and storyboards. That's the big five. Those are the ones that we normally deal with. I've given an example of what the first one. So document on a mood board. I'm going to use some software. I'm going to use my desktop publishing software. An example of which could be Microsoft Publisher. This is a digital method of creating the mood board. And the audience for my mood board is the client and the design team. Okay, so if you haven't now managed to complete that, please fill in those bits on your table, and then leave it. We'll move on, and you can finish that after we've done the other bits and pieces. Okay. So as ever, there will be a homework. For some reason it says health and safety there, but it won't. It will actually be listed as lesson 12, which will be hardware, techniques and software used in the creation of iMedia. So if you've watched the rest of my video lessons, you'll know that I now wish you to email me with the answer to these questions. So what are the two techniques used to produce pre-production documents? If you've done that table, that should be easy. Name 3 items of hardware that can be used to help pre-production documents. You can always rerun the video to find those. And name 2 software types that you might use. And here we go. This is the bit where I say software types. Okay, so there are 2 things that you could use there. Again, if you're not sure, go back over the video and it does actually tell you what those will be. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.